All right. Welcome back to another edition of the Teed Up Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Quinn, back here again. This is our third official episode, maybe the fourth episode. I can't remember now already. So let's get right into it tonight. I'm recording here live Wednesday night. Oh, we got some feedback coming in. Sorry about that. So yeah, we got no guest here tonight. That's all right, because I'm going here live on Wednesday instead of the traditional Thursday night. It's Thursday night football this week, and my beloved Buffalo Bills are playing, so I decided to do Wednesday instead. So we'll see how it goes here. I don't think we have anyone in the chat room. Just a reminder, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, come on into the chat room. It's a big part of this experience that we're trying to provide as a podcast, getting people live in the chat talking about the NBA. So what I'd like to do is talk about the previous week's games and then leading up to the weekend's games. We're not going to get too much into the previous week's games in this podcast because there's a couple things I want to talk about. So we'll jump right into it here. Something that we touched on a little bit in the past podcast. You can go back and listen to it. It's on iTunes. Was I'm not really sold on the Cleveland Cavaliers this year, and I just kind of bought into the hype that they were going to be good going into the season because everybody told me that was the truth. I didn't like the moves they've made in the offseason. When they traded Kyrie, I saw a lot of people out there on Twitter saying that they somehow won that Kyrie deal because they got the pick and Isaiah Thomas. I don't think that they won that trade. I think it's becoming more and more clear that they didn't win that trade as Kyrie takes over right now as one of the best players in the NBA. And this team has some serious issues. They're 3-4 right now. They've lost 3 games straight. Last week we talked about, they're struggling. They look pretty good when they are moving the ball, but the times that they're moving the ball seem to be fewer and far between. I really think their biggest issue right now is coaching. I think the Cavs have always had an issue with coaching. I think LeBron James, for as intelligent of a player as everybody in the league says he is, that intelligence, I don't know if he's coachable. He doesn't appear to be. There's always been some issues with the coaches that he's had. Spoelstra, even, they had issues there in Miami when they weren't winning. So I wouldn't put him on the level as a coach killer, but there's definitely some issue there with LeBron and coaches. He had issues with David Blatt. Blatt is actually a really good basketball mind. So not really sure what happened there. Now they've lost 3 straight. LeBron comes out last week and says, what month is it? It's October. It's not an issue. Talk to me at the end of the season. But then I saw a story today that they, before practice, had a team meeting, kind of a closed door meeting where people could air out their grievances and all that. And it apparently got heated. Maybe not heated, but LeBron was very vocal, is what was said about the meeting. So LeBron's telling the media, obviously, one thing that he's not really worried. But then if he's very vocal in this meeting, I'm assuming that he is a little bit worried about the state of this team. And if LeBron's worried, he really controls this franchise right now. So there's definitely some red flags for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Right now, they're 3-4. I think technically they're not even in a playoff spot at 3-4. So other teams are, going to have to use this opportunity to get a good jump on them in the standings. I mean, I get it, guys. I know it's a really long season. It's an 82-game season. There's plenty of basketball to be left to be played. And I'm not one to try to jump too early in the season on any side, whether it's high or low. But all the signs right now are just pointing to Cleveland struggling. I don't think they're in the top 5 in any statistical category as a team right now. I'm checking right here. I don't see them in the top 5 in any statistical category. That's not good if you're claiming to be, you're the defending champs and people are kind of just saying, hey, this is the best team in the East, and they're easily going to defend the East and make it to another finals appearance against the Warriors. It just does not seem to be something that's ringing true here early in the season. So something's broken in Cleveland. You start to wonder maybe if Tyronn Lue gets on the hot seat at any point in this season. If things continue in this trend, do they just blame it on the coach? I don't think he's a very good coach. I can't see a real system that's being put in place there in Cleveland. So he might be the scapegoat, the easy scapegoat for this. But it's not a good sign right now. I don't know what the exact issue is. Maybe when D Rose comes back, that'll help. I don't think he's the answer to help. Isaiah Thomas, I don't think is going to come back till they're saying maybe January, around Christmas, January. So that's not a good sign. And that hip injury, you just don't know how he's going to be able to recover from that. I have a lot of friends that are Celtics fans, and before he was even traded, I kind of questioned his ability to come back from that injury then. And his ability to come back from that injury, especially without having the surgery done way back then. So we'll see how he comes back. I know there's some issues when he got traded, whether or not he was able to even finalize the deal, if he was going to be able to pass a physical. They ended up passing. So there's some question marks for Isaiah Thomas. I don't know that he is the answer either in Cleveland. So we'll see. Obviously, Cavs fans aren't panicking. They're giving you the excuse that it's an all-new team. There's a lot of new pieces, but there is a lot of new pieces, but it's not an entirely new team here, guys. This is a team that defended they're the defending champs of the Eastern Conference. They've been to the finals years in a row. I mean, they still got the core of that team together, minus Kyrie, and maybe Kyrie was carrying a little bit more of the second role than people thought, and maybe that second role is a little bit more important, and no one's been able to pick those pieces up. So big thing to watch. I'm not sold on the Cavaliers. I think right now it's pretty clear that the Boston Celtics are the best team in the East. Even after the Hayward injury, I thought that may affect them and allow one of these teams like the Wizards, the Bucks, to be able to kind of slide into that second place seed. But that isn't what's happened at all. The Celtics have responded fantastic in the face of that adversity of losing their second best player first quarter of the first game. They've done a great job, and they just look impressive in all their games. They definitely have some issues that they're going to work out, but Brad Stevens is, I think, the best coach in the East right now, and he's got his team really playing well, and Kyrie Irving is just taking a hold of this, being the man on this team. I don't think there's anyone right now that can guard him, so I think the Celtics are the clear favorites in the East, and if they can get home court advantage, Cleveland's going to be in real trouble in the playoffs. So something to keep an eye out. Cleveland doesn't want to get buried early because they might have a hard time catching up to Boston for that home court advantage. So just something to keep an eye on. I'm sure we're going to touch on Cleveland in the weeks to come. I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. There's clearly some issues in Cleveland. Offensive ball movement's an issue. Just putting a full game together seems to be an issue for this team. So we'll see. Also, another thing to keep an eye on for them is LeBron has given up on teams in the past. So how long before he really starts calling teammates out publicly, before he starts having temper tantrums on the court? Those are things to keep an eye on, because if that stuff starts happening too early in the season, man, LeBron might be packing his bags for heading out west a little earlier than people thought. I'm not saying a trade deadline thing, but he might give up on this team before the season's over, and clear indications that he would be getting ready to leave the franchise. So all stuff to keep an eye on. A lot of it's just speculation here. We're just kind of talking, but let's move on here. Another big story that came out was the Philadelphia 76ers are not going to exercise the option on Okafor's rookie deal. So basically saying that he's not in their future plans. I mean, we kind of knew this because really for the last year and a half, he's come up in almost every trade rumor whenever we start talking about NBA trades. I know for a while it was really rumored that he was going to the Bulls last year. I think a deal was almost in place even, and it didn't end up going through. I know he said goodbye to all of his teammates last year. I mean, clearly that relationship in Philadelphia has been broken for a while. And kind of go back, rewind a little bit, a little revisionist history here. This is one of the ones where I was really big on Okafor coming out of college. And Jalen Rose talks about this all the time on his podcasts, where he talks about guys getting drafted to the wrong team and in the wrong situation. And I think that's exactly what's happened to Okafor in this situation. Now, while I was high on Okafor, I want to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and just say that I think he can be a good NBA player, a good big man offensively in this league. And I just think he needs to be in the right situation to do that. And Philadelphia clearly was not that situation. I mean, the pick was weird. They were already had a lot of young, big guys. I think they just picked him because they were there and he was there, and it was in the position that people said he should have been picked in. I'm not sure that he was actually a good fit for what they were trying to do, and clearly not, because he's not even getting playing time, and he's clearly out of the equation as far as the process in place for Philadelphia. So I don't think he was drafted into the right situation, which is a real bummer for him because he was a super dominant college player. And, I think if Okafor was drafted in a different era of basketball, he would be a much better player. I mean, his offensive game, when he's really trying, is very smooth, and it's hard to really defend him when he's when he's playing hard. And that's another problem entirely, is that he has this rap of being lazy, and it shows in the tape when you watch him. I mean, the guy doesn't play any defense. So it's going to be, that goes to the conversation of where is Okafor's value now? So they've already determined that he's not part of their future. He's not playing. There really isn't a lot of leverage on the side of the Sixers, except for that they have this asset that was a top 5 pick. What do they do with him, right? So I was trying to rack my brain earlier for, what teams out there could be in the market for Okafor. I think the Bulls are out of the picture. I know the Bulls were in the market a year ago for Okafor, but I think they were trying to make a playoff run at the time, and they had a much different roster. I don't think the Bulls are in play. I think they like the big men they have, and they're trying to tank right now to acquire assets to build the future, and I don't think that future includes Jahlil Okafor at center. So I think the Bulls are out of the picture. Trying to think of maybe some other teams that could get in on this. And I can't really think of any that are in need for a center. That's still a developmental process that would be willing to give up anything for him. I know he's potentially asking for a buyout, which would help, because I really don't think the Sixers have any leverage here to make like an actual deal that they could gain something from. And the one thing I kept coming back to is maybe the Celtics. The Celtics have a lot of rotation at the center position, although he doesn't really fit the need that they have of a real rim protector. He's terrible on defense, so I don't know how he fits there, but he would give them a nice offensive backup option to Horford, to spell some of those Horford minutes down low and give them still some offense, because really Baines and Theus, or whatever his name is, are not good offensive options. They're doing pretty well on defense, and Baines is one of the best screen guys in the league, but he's not going to give you a whole lot on offense. And really, that's like right now seems to be Boston's biggest issue, is when Isaiah and Horford aren't on the court. Who's getting those points? Jaylen Brown's done well, but he's not necessarily the guy to be relied on for points, and he's a starter. So when he's not on the court, then who is it? Marcus Smart's super streaky. I've been really hard on Marcus Smart, but he's actually playing a lot better. I'll give him some credit. He makes a lot of mistakes. I don't love that. I feel like for everything that he does well, he makes a mistake, but he's playing a lot better than I thought. But still, they could use another scorer on the rotation. So maybe Jahlil Okafor fits in there. And something to keep in mind, I believe the Celtics got I think it's called the disabled player exemption for the Hayward injury, which gives them, I think last I saw, it was like $8 million. So they could use some of that towards bringing in Okafor, because I know they're pretty cap strapped outside of that. So they could bring him in, and that could be a nice little fit for him. I think that would be a good position for him, because he's not going to have to be the guy, and if he doesn't buy into Brad Stevens' system, he's going to be out of there. Brad Stevens just isn't going to put up with that. Brad Stevens is respected, so I think Okafor will come in. He's going to have to try. He might have to lose a little weight. I'm not really sure. But he could fill that kind of like Jared Sullinger role. I know that not a lot of Celtics fans want to hear that, but we'll see. So Celtics are a team to maybe keep an eye on for Jahlil Okafor, but I'm not sure anything happens quickly. We're going to have to see if the Sixers are willing to do a buyout. I know that's what Okafor wants, but I don't know. Give me your thoughts. Tweet me. Where do you think Jahlil Okafor ends up? And is he a bust already? I don't know. I think it's too early to say. I think it's leaning towards a bust, but I mean, like my man Jalen Rose says, a lot of this is all about where you end up, what system you end up in, and I just think this was just a terrible thing for Okafor to end up on the Sixers. I do like the Sixers, but they just terrible pick, wasted pick, and just terrible use of a good skill set. I mean, he does have skills. He's just lazy, doesn't play a lot of defense, but the guy has a nice offensive game. So definitely something here to keep an eye on. Jahlil Okafor, not part of the Sixers' future. So next topic I want to talk about here is the Suns right now. They don't get a lot of credit for what they're doing. They're not a great team, although they're playing pretty well since firing their coach. But a guy that I love, every time I turn on the TV and see anything that the Suns are doing, highlights, Suns games that are on, is Devin Booker. And I'm in the New York market. So the other night, I think it was a Yes Network, and it was Nets Suns. Not a great game, to be honest. I didn't really have much else going on. But anyway, it was Nets Suns, and it was Booker versus D'Angelo Russell, basically, was the show. And Devin Booker put up 32 points, and it was an impressive showing. The guy is just a pure scorer, man. He can really score from anywhere. I've said this on, I think on the first podcast I was talking, like, I'm not a very good evaluator of talent from college players to the NBA. And Booker was one of those guys where I'm not a big, I wasn't a big fan of his game coming out of college. I thought this guy was just riding the coattails of a national championship and, a stacked team, and that somebody was just taking a flyer on him because he had a couple good games in the tournament. Boy, was I wrong. Devin Booker is actually a legit scorer. He's the kind of guy I think that the Suns can build a franchise around. So he's only 2 years in the league. The guy is putting up big time numbers. He's averaging 22 points a game. So he's a guy I want people to keep an eye on. Devin Booker, he might be the future of the Suns. I don't know what the Suns are doing right now. I don't know the direction of their franchise. Things don't seem to be going very well for them, but they could have a top 5 pick this year if things play out the way I thought they would for the Suns. So something to keep an eye. You pair him with one nice piece. He's so young. That's a nice foundation to build something in Phoenix. And I really hope that Phoenix turns things around and develops into a decent team, because I think that they missed out years ago with Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire, and I'd love to see them get competitive again and be a legitimate basketball team again. It's been too many years. So pulling for the Suns. I just wanted to mention how much fun Devin Booker is to watch. Definitely a player, if he's ever on in my market, or if I have a chance to watch him, I'm tuning in just to watch him, because he's a really exciting guy, and he's just getting lost right now down in Phoenix and not getting enough credit. So if you get a chance, if he's on in your market, take a look at Devin Booker and just enjoy him, because he's a young, good talent. And this goes back to at the beginning of the season, I saw a lot of people that don't necessarily watch a lot of basketball, and they were talking about the lack of parity in the league. And clearly here to start the season, at least, we're seeing there is a little bit more parity than people want to say that there is. The Cavs are struggling. The Warriors aren't beating everybody right now. They're struggling in some games. So there's a little more parity, but more importantly to the conversation of Devin Booker, there is so much good young talent around the league right now that almost every team has a young stud on their roster, including a team like the Suns. The Bulls have Markkanen, a fun guy to watch, rookie. So even these teams that aren't going to be very good, may only win 20 games, have some really fun, interesting guys to watch. And that's the beauty right now of the NBA. It wasn't always like this. Even in the early 2000s, there was a few top-heavy teams, and there wasn't that many great the teams that were bad were just bad. They just had bad rosters, old guys, not fun. Right now, there's just a ton of young, good talent. So almost every team is very watchable just for that reason alone, that there's super good young talent in the league. So this week, I wanted to highlight Devin Booker and just kind of let you know he's a guy. If he's on in your market, take a look at him, enjoy him while he's there doing his thing, and hopefully they can put some pieces around him to help build that franchise and move it forward. So the next thing I want to talk about here is the Memphis Grizzlies. Early here in the season, the Memphis Grizzlies have taken the #1 seed in the West. It's a little weird because they're not a team that I had as even really, I don't even remember having them as a playoff team this year. I've seen too much of the same old thing with the Grizzlies. To me, they haven't been a good team. So I was surprised when I looked at the standings the other day to see them. I think they're at 5-2 alone. Let me just pull that up here. 5-2 alone at the top of the West. So I think they have a couple big games coming up this week, and that will show whether or not they belong in that conversation here early on. Again, like I said earlier, we try not to make too big of a leap on this first month of basketball as who a team is. But I'm going to start a segment next time we have a guest on the show about buying or lying, basically whether or not you're buying a hype or that person or team is lying to you. And if I was asked that question right now, are the Memphis Grizzlies buying or lying? I would say that they're lying. I think maybe they are a playoff team where I didn't have them as that, but they're definitely not, in my opinion, a top 5 team in the West even. So they're off to a great start. Good for them. They've won some really tough games against some pretty good teams. And they've been in games too, even the games that they lost. I do love Marc Gasol. And I really like Mike Conley a lot. But outside of that, there just isn't a whole lot to me that says that this team can make any type of run and maintain this. I do like Chandler Parsons. I will say that. So he's a nice piece, but he's not a big time go-to guy. Tyreke Evans had the potential to be at one point in his career, but again, I don't see him as much more than a, rotational guy. He might be able to put up some big numbers every once in a while, but nothing of any substance. So this roster is not amazing. They're all right. They're good. Ben McLemore should be coming back soon. I think he's coming off of surgery. It was just announced today, I think, that he's joining a G League team, their G League team. So we'll see. But the Grizzlies, I'm not buying it, guys. I don't think that they are, definitely not a top team in the West. I don't think they're a top 5 team in the West. So let's keep an eye on that. We'll approach that and see if I was wrong. I usually am wrong about this stuff. So who knows? They could hang out around the top 3 all year, but I just don't see it. I mean, you have the Spurs who just aren't healthy yet. They're I think, going to still be up there. The Rockets are definitely going to be up there. The Warriors are going to definitely start clicking. So I just don't see any spot for the Grizzlies up in that top 5 spot, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Grizzlies are a team to keep an eye out on. And, this goes back again to that parity conversation. Maybe there's more parity than everybody wanted to admit in the NBA. And maybe there is 5 top teams in each conference. We don't know. We don't know yet. So that's about it for the topics that I wanted to talk about tonight before, the games are already getting started here. So I'm not going to keep going. And I want to go watch them because there's a couple good games on tonight. But tomorrow, some games to keep an eye on. I'm just going to run down through this weekend's what I think are the good games to keep an eye on, stuff that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on. Thursday night, you have the Warriors Spurs. It's a TNT game. It starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Warriors are 5-3. Spurs are 4-3. Obviously, the Spurs aren't healthy yet, but they're still playing pretty well. Actually, I take that back. They're not playing great. I watched the Celtics game the other night, and their shooting was just terrible. They were taking bad shots, but they're still somehow 4-3 and kind of fighting to stay alive there in the middle playoff seating in the West. So a game to keep an eye on. Warriors are 5-3. People are kind of, talking about them struggling, even though they really aren't struggling. They're top of the offensive statistics in almost every category. So, but that's going to be a fun game. It'd be a lot more fun if Tony Parker and Kawhi were back, but you can't have it all. The evening game on that, or the late game on that one, is LA Lakers versus Portland, which to me that should be a fun game. Ball versus Lillard. I think that's going to be a decent game for the late. I probably won't stay up for it, but I'll definitely be checking the highlights in the morning. Friday night, there's only one game that I'm paying attention to Friday night, and it's the Celtics versus the Thunder. Big time marquee Friday night primetime game, 9:30 ESPN. Celtics are 5-2, Thunder are 4-3. I don't really have to get into it too much. These are 2 really good teams going at it. NBA, ESPN, Friday Night Basketball doesn't get much better than this. So definitely, if you're a fan of the NBA at all, from the very casual fan to the diehard fan, tune in ESPN because that should be a really fun game to watch. I can't wait to see how those two teams do battle. It's going to be, two of the big dogs in the NBA going at it in prime time on Friday night, which is great to see because a lot of these games have been letdowns so far. So I'm hoping that this one isn't. Saturday, there's only one game that I'm interested in for Saturday Eve, and it's actually in the evening. It's 5-2 Grizzlies going up against the 4-2 Clippers. Again, Clippers are a team that I wasn't big on, and they're sitting there right behind the Grizzlies. So this is one of those tests for the Grizzlies. We just talked about them earlier in the show here. Are they a legitimate contender, or are they kind of pretending here early in the season and tricking some people into thinking they're a good team? I think this is going to be a test for them right here. But the same with the Clippers. Same could be said for them. Are they a good team? So I think this is a good measuring stick here early in the season for both teams to, take a look against another good opponent, maybe an equal opponent for each of them and see kind of where they stack up. So that's 3:30 on Saturday, Grizzlies versus Clippers. And then we go into the Sunday games. We have 6 o'clock Sunday. It's Wizards versus Raptors. Both teams are 4-2. I'm looking for one of these teams to really show me that they're separating into that top 3 because they're two teams that I just can't get a good read on right now. I love John Wall. I think he's awesome. I'm just worried about the depth on the Wizards. I don't think they have really enough depth to be a top 3 team. But John Wall, man, he's super impressive, and that starting lineup is playing at an impressive clip. So they are definitely keeping them in games and really just winning them games, but that depth is just terrible. So and the Raptors are just always sitting there in those like top 3 to 4 seed the last few years, and they just haven't been able to take a step forward to, be a top team. And with the Cavaliers struggling right now, these teams have to smell blood, and somebody's going to have to go on a run and really build up some wins now while the Cavs are struggling. So this is going to be an interesting battle here in the East to see if either one of those two teams can start to gain a little separation right now and kind of assert themselves as one of the top 2-3 teams in the East while the Cavs are struggling especially. So definitely a game to keep an eye on. That one's at 6 o'clock. I don't think any of these games are on national TV, though. I think they're League Pass only, so I won't be able to watch it, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on the highlights and the scores on that game. Then the 7 o'clock is Jazz Rockets, and Jazz have been a little bit of a surprise to me. After losing Hayward, they're still 4-3. Who knows about the Jazz? That's a team that I want to keep an eye on a little bit. I think they have some talent there. I love Rudy Gobert. So if I've been saying for a couple of years now, if you have a good big man, you might be able to dominate the league because it's a league that plays small ball. So if you have a good enough big man, it's kind of going in the opposite direction of the tide. But if he's good enough, he's going to be very difficult to stop. And I think Rudy Gobert might be that guy. And I'm a big Ricky Rubio fan. So that's a great game to keep an eye on. And I'm also a big Rockets fan. I had Harden winning the MVP. Statistically, it doesn't look like he's going to be in that conversation this year early again. But Vegas doesn't have him as very high odds to get into that MVP conversation. But that's all right, man, because I'm still big on Harden. And I think Harden's going to, will that team to a lot more victories than maybe they should on paper have. So a game to keep an eye on. Really will be a test more for the Jazz to see where they're at, see what type of team that is. So definitely stuff to keep an eye on here this weekend, guys. Plenty of games in the NBA. If you're sick of football already, I'm not. I'll be watching mostly all football this weekend and just kind of secondary keeping an eye on the NBA games, but still be back here next week to talk about it as much as I can. So we'll see here. I believe next week I'm also doing the show on Wednesday. I forget why that is, but I'll let you know why we're doing it Wednesday next week again. But I appreciate everyone joining me here. Well, actually, nobody joined me, but I appreciate if you're listening. Find us on iTunes. You can find us on Podbean. Find the YouTube channel, like it, subscribe to it, comment on it. Find me on Twitter at TD underscore up underscore podcast. So that's at TD underscore up underscore podcast. And you can also find me personally at Aaron Quinn 716. Just want to talk basketball, guys. So I'll tweet out a bunch of stuff about basketball. Let's get the conversation started. If you know anybody that listens to the NBA, share this podcast with them. If you know anyone that would be a good guest to come on, let me know, because I've had guests kind of fall through the last couple of weekends. I know a lot of people are busy. A lot of the guys I know participate in other podcasts as well, whether it's football or other sports podcasts. So they get pretty tied up. So let me know if anyone wants to come on, chat NBA for a little bit. We do about a half hour, 2 hour show every time. But anyway, I won't take up any more of your time this evening, guys. Enjoy the games this weekend, and hopefully we'll catch up next week. Thanks again.